All right, hey traders, this is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group with your end of day recap for Wednesday, Fed Day. So a lot of movers going on today. Besides the Fed, there was a lot of stuff going on today. So really an active day all around. Let's just start with the indices, as I always like to kick off the videos, and then we'll go to the option activity, which was really interesting today. So. You know, this is basically how most Fed days work. If you're not used to trading around the Fed days, usually there's an initial reaction, and then there's a digestion. Especially when Janet Yellen has the press conference. Usually the statement, there's an initial reaction, and then usually things kind of start to regress. Usually there's an overreaction, and I think we saw that in a bunch of different things. So I had detailed this out pretty nicely. If you missed my intraday video, I put together, scenarios, and this pretty much all worked out. But we did see a reversion back. So, I would say that we fell on the hawkish side. They are talking about a December rate hike. I think it's a 63% chance. When we came into the day, it was a 50% chance of a rate hike for December. So that's bumped up to a 63. I'm surprised it's actually not higher than that. I guess there's still not putting any faith into that. They did talk about the balance sheet reduction. So yeah, so hawkish means equities down, especially those momentum names, which the Qs kind of got beat up the most. Bonds really didn't do much today. I don't think bonds could figure out which way to go. The dollar was up. Banks got a big bid off of that. They did come in at the end of the day. Metals went down and emerging markets went down because of the move in the dollar. Let me just see where that dollar ended up today. But so those were the initial reactions, and that was very true to form. So the dollar did end up 80 basis points. Maybe we'll set up for a trade after today. That's again pretty falls into the hawkish camp. So yeah, everything that we detailed beforehand. So we've got a nice little road plan. We did put out a trade idea earlier. I did hit one target on it. I took off 35% of the trade, which was for a 40% target. So if you didn't have a chance to see that, you could check out my YouTube channel, and I detailed everything here as well as a trade idea for the day. So that was that. And so when you look over at the S&P, it's flat again. I think a lot of people are having a hard time with this. Just talking about, oh wow, the S&P is not moving. That's really not the case. It's in terms of the overall level of the index, sure, I guess it's really not moving that much, but there's a lot of stocks that are moving around. It's not like stocks. I guess where the misconception is that stocks are really moving. There's a big separation every day. There's a big rotate. It seems like there are many rotations that are going on, but just a big difference between the sectors that are leading and the ones that are declining. And it seems to switch almost every day. Monday was a big day where tech outperformed. There was a lot of ETF flows. There was a lot of money that went into some tech ETFs on Monday, which was kind of a one-day event. I checked some of these inflows. Which I think I talked about earlier. I don't have this one up anymore, but IGV was one. Yeah, it looks like I took down that screen, so I can't show that for you. But yeah, I think it was $160 million that went into a smaller cap tech ETF, and that caused those things to really lift. And then it's like, well, what happened Tuesday and Wednesday? Well, that buyer wasn't there anymore. So that was a one-day event, and kind of things were kind of just left out in the wind a little bit with people looking for follow-on moves, and those buyers were not there, which were there on Monday. So I think that was part of the cause for that. But today, Apple was the story this morning. Apple really got smoked. It did come back, maybe a little bit. It seems like this happens a lot. Either with, there's rumors about production, production delays, and half the time they're just rumors. The other information that was out was saying that there's weak demand already for the new iPhone. So this caused all the semi names to tumble. So SMH finished down 1.3%, well off the lows, but names like Skyworks really got crunched, down 4%. Qorvo was another one that got, Corvo was another one that got beaten up. This one didn't come back at all, down 5.4%. Broadcom was another one. This one had a nice recovery from the lows, but man, these things really took a hit. And that seems to be the case whenever there's this Apple rumor. So, Apple, the thing about it is you can't really look at these names in isolation. Apple affects a lot of these tech semi names. So it did get a break below the 50-day moving average. So be a little bit careful with Apple. We'll kind of keep an eye on it. But just to kind of go through the rest of this. But so you could see, that was the bad. I always start with the bad first. But industrials, energy was very strong. Even if you look at some of the smaller names, like if you look at the XOP ETF, really making some nice strides and some continuation from last week's performance. So XLE is kind of the slower mover of the ETF universe. There's three of them that I look at. OIH was also up nicely today. CVX, which is a name that I've been talking about, actually finished flat today, but there's a lot of call buying in there. RIG was a name that we saw that was call buying. Listen, there were so many names that saw call buying today. It was a bit ridiculous. It was a lot to process and to trade for day trades. There was a lot of I would say aggressive activity. Some of it short dated. If I turn over to today's option activity, I'm even leaving some names out here because there's just too many, and it's days like this when you have 2 days of option activity and then you're trying to trade as well. But it is what it is. Every once in a while we get a day like this where there's just tons of different names. I could go through a handful of some of these. We continue to see call buying in AA, Shack, which we've seen repeat activity in. All the restaurants did pretty well. We saw McDonald's call buyer right on the open. In this whole group, I think a lot of people realizing that the restaurant group, even Chipotle had a nice day today, up 3%. But Shack, I did not chase this order today. I think it was pretty good. There was some just small, very, very light call buying. Aggressive, right? I mean, they're going up and they're definitely buying, but it's pretty small orders. Keep in mind, last week I think it was we saw some 2019 calls go up in Shack, but you're messing with names that are way below the 200-day moving average. I know they have a high short interest, which could really make them pop, but most of my models, below the 200-day moving averages, they could work out for a real nice pot, intraday pop. But if you're a day trader, some of these names are great for you. Speaking of kind of the realm of those, what's Blackberry symbol? I always forget. I always confuse these with this and Bed Bath and Beyond. But Blackberry, take a look. VPOX really came into play today for a lot of things moving to the upside and to the downside. Somebody asked me again what VPOX are today. Version point of controls. When price gets out of a range, price will gravitate to where there was history in a name, where a lot of buyers and sellers were before. So these yellow lines, this is where a lot of volume was concentrated on a previous time frame. That's as far as we went. Another example of that today was in the S&P. The S&P, once it gets below a range, well, I mean, look at this. It tags it, and then it's almost like again, I say this all the time, but it acts as a magnet. It really does. Where there was previously a lot of buyers and sellers, price will get down to there, and then usually revert, which is exactly what we did in the S&P. So I sent this chart out. It is such a great indicator or a place for you to take profits. That's basically how I use it. I use it where if the price hasn't gotten there, I usually at least take a good target out of VPOC. Because we often see reversions, and this was a textbook example. Another level that we got to on the S&P today was the top of value on the 1 hour chart. We touched that briefly, and it held beautifully. But again, this is the usual whipsaw move that you see on Fed Day. Another trade that I really liked today was MIK. This is Michael's. Again, this is another area that's I like this. I did not take the trade yesterday. Here, I'll show you what this looks like. So first of all, let me show you yesterday's. Yesterday there were 6,000 November 22.5 calls. They were bought. Look at what they did today. They bought another 6,000 today. So I think the total volume today was 6,900. So they got 12,000 of these calls now sitting at the November 22 and a half strike. So again, the chart I think looks pretty good. I mean, it's kind of the only thing I don't like is the 200-day moving average is downward sloping, but you got a break of the 200-day moving average and a retest. So again, you're going to know. I mean, you know exactly where this trade's not going to work if it breaks this white line. I would say get out, just like they do in what's the name of that movie? Get Out. I can't remember it. The Amityville Horror. There we go. Um, old movie. Fold. They keep going after Fold. So Fold has some data that's coming out, but man, oh man, Fold 52-week high. It's almost every day. It's kind of like the IGT. We took a lot of profits today in the room today on the gap up in IGT on the Bank of America upgrade. I think it was a great place to either get out of it or take a good portion off. You know, they started buying these IGT calls basically here. I mean, you had a $20 move to 23 bucks. You know, and call buying all along the way. So I think it's a great place to either get out completely or at least take a good portion off and maybe leave a runner. But this Fold, they've been going after, they've been selling, they've been buying calls and selling puts. There's been almost every day we've seen a little bit more of a chip being put down in calls. So really aggressive. Another, you know, again, I could go on and on and on about some of these names. Sarepta was another good one. NCLH, this is the not Carnival, Norwegian Cruise Line. We made some money in this a couple weeks ago when we saw this first time around, and we got out just in the nick of time. Take a look at what they did today in NCLH. This they rolled, so they had these October 60s, which they stayed in. They got out of them today and they rolled down to the 57 and a half. So they still liked the name, and then they went ahead and they bought some more. I believe they bought the 55 calls as well for October. So, you know, some of these names they get pounded with hurricane storm warnings could bounce back rather quickly. So there's one or two other trades that I was gonna. There's a lot of trades on the put side too. They've traded 10,000 of the Rent-A-Center March 11 puts. They traded a lot of Skyworks. They traded Microsoft puts. These are mostly in the beginning of the day. First Solar, we saw puts and then calls as Deutsche Bank defended the name. We saw a lot of puts in Apple on, and then we saw calls in Apple later. So, you know, it's people are pushing things down, and then people are buying the dip. So, you know, really, you have to be really fast in some of these names. I was just going to mention a couple other names. Amazon also saw a call buyer late in the day. Amazon actually reversed and finished up on the day. So not a huge day, but from 965 to 973, I mean, they bought the calls right here where you see this big green candle. Out in November again. They like these November calls. A couple other names. Splunk. Splunk is a name that we put on in we put a trade on I think on Monday. So this is starting to work. Somebody came out, I think Symantec came out and said that they were looking at the company. Decided not to go through with it, but I guess the interest was enough to get this name going. So new recent high for this name. And then of course AMD, which we called out right away. But we saw a little bit of nibbling in some weekly calls earlier in the week. You know, there's always flow in AMD. If anybody tries to tell you that, oh, there was a call buyer this week, there's a call buyer just about every week in AMD. So, you know, it is a long name for me. I almost got stopped out in this thing about 3 or 4 times on the 200-day moving average, but I managed to hang in there with this position. One of the things that I also considering I didn't fully get stopped out. I didn't hit my stop price, which is 1.5 ATRs below the 200-day moving average. But also, I like that the 200-day moving average has been rising, so it kind of hung on by a thread here. So I'll leave it there today. Just I could go on and on about option activity because it was just a huge amount, but I would say all the trends are in place. The only thing that really got banged up today was semis and filled this gap from the other day. We'll see what it does here, but it kind of looks like an evening star. I don't want to just say read completely into candlestick patterns and say the rally in semis is over, but maybe it digests a little bit more. And I think that makes sense. after a big run up after a couple weeks. So sometimes these things will come into you. That's kind of what I'm looking at as well in the IGV ETF as well, which I've been talking a lot about. This is the top, software and tech name. So if this name comes into the 50-day moving average, if it comes down a little bit more, I would be a buyer there. So I'll leave it there for the day. Have a great evening, and I'll see you back in the trading room Thursday morning.